In a world obsessed with hustle, pressure, and grinding harder, Sun Tzu offers a dangerous idea. When the stakes rise, the answer is not always more effort. Sometimes more effort is exactly what gets you defeated. Because pressure does something strange to most people. It makes them rush. It makes them louder. It makes them emotional. It makes them predictable. And the moment you become predictable, you become controllable. That is why the people who win under pressure are rarely the people who panic the hardest or work the longest. They are the people who can still think. They are the people who can still see. They are the people who know how to make the other side waste energy while they preserve their own. Sun Tzu understood this centuries ago. He knew that in moments of fear, urgency, and chaos, most people defeat themselves before the real battle even begins. So tonight, we are not talking about motivation. We are not talking about hype. We are talking about strategy. We are talking about how to stay dangerous when the pressure is high. We are talking about how to outsmart instead of outwork. And if you can learn this, pressure stops being the thing that breaks you. It becomes the thing that exposes everyone else. There is a lie modern life repeats over and over again. That the answer to every problem is to do more, work more, push more, force more, sacrifice more sleep, take on more tasks, move faster, react sooner, grind harder. At first, this sounds noble. It sounds disciplined. It sounds like strength. But under pressure, more is often the first step toward collapse. Because pressure does not just test your effort, it tests your judgment. And if your judgment fails, then your effort becomes waste. Sun Tzu did not build his philosophy around blind labor. He built it around intelligent advantage. He understood that war was not won by the side that simply swung the hardest. War was won by the side that saw clearly, adapted quickly, and made fewer costly mistakes. That is why one of the deepest lessons in the art of war is this. The wise warrior avoids the strength of the enemy and strikes at weakness. That is not laziness. That is not cowardice. That is precision. And precision matters most when the pressure is highest, because when life closes in on you, when money is tight, when time is short, when people doubt you, when emotions rise, when consequences grow, your first instinct will often be the wrong one. You will want to prove yourself through force. You will want to overcompensate. You will want to attack every problem at once. You will want to show the world how hard you can work. But Sun Tzu would ask a colder question. Why are you trying so hard to overpower what you could outmaneuver? That question changes everything, because it moves you from reaction to strategy, from emotion to positioning, from exhaustion to leverage. And that is what this video is about. Not how to become passive, not how to avoid hard work, but how to stop wasting your strength in the wrong places, how to remain composed when others get desperate, how to think clearly when everyone around you is rushing into traps, how to win under pressure by refusing to become a slave to pressure. And to understand that, we need to start with a real story. A story about a man who faced one of the most terrifying kinds of pressure imaginable: capture, humiliation, and death. And who survived not by overpowering his situation, but by outsmarting it. In the ancient world, there were men who understood something that modern people often forget. The body can be restrained. Circumstances can close in. Power can be taken from your hands. But as long as the mind remains unbroken, the game is not over. There is a story, echoed in classical tradition, about the philosopher Theodorus of Cyrene. Accounts vary in detail, as many ancient stories do, but the core lesson remains striking. Theodorus was reportedly captured and brought before a ruler who expected submission. The expectation was simple. Fear the powerful, bow under pressure, and let terror do the work. That is how dominance usually functions. It relies less on actual force than on psychological collapse. Once someone is afraid enough, they begin helping their enemy control them. They speak too quickly, reveal too much, beg at the wrong time, trade away dignity for the illusion of safety. Theodorus did something different. He stayed calm. He did not hand over his mind to the situation, and in that calm, he turned the whole encounter. Legend says that when threatened, he responded not with panic, but with sharp intelligence, undermining the ruler's intimidation by refusing to emotionally submit to it. Whether every line of the story is historically exact is less important than what generations preserved from it. A man under pressure preserved his power by refusing to panic. He did not have the stronger army. He did not control the room. He did not possess immediate force, but he still had command over the most important battlefield, his own mind. And that is where Sun Tzu begins too. Not with movement, not with attack, not with aggression, with perception. Because the first person pressure tries to conquer is not your enemy. It is you. Pressure wants to narrow your thinking. Pressure wants to make you impulsive. Pressure wants to make you feel like speed equals control. But in reality, panic creates openings. A pressured person leaks information. A pressured person becomes easy to bait. A pressured person confuses motion with progress. And a pressured person often attacks where they should have waited, speaks where they should have observed, and commits where they should have repositioned. This is why outsmarting under pressure begins with one ruthless principle. Do not let urgency steal your intelligence. That sounds simple, but almost nobody lives it. Look at business. A founder sees competitors moving faster, so he launches too early with a weak offer. Look at relationships. A person feels distance, so they overtext, overexplain, overreact, and create the very rejection they feared. Look at conflict. A man feels disrespected, so he tries to reclaim power through emotional escalation and ends up surrendering real leverage. Look at money. An investor sees volatility, panics, and makes the worst decision at the worst time. Everywhere you look, pressure is turning people into servants of impulse. And Sun Tzu would say the same thing in every case. The one who can remain composed sees opportunities invisible to the emotional mind. Theodorus, whether in exact fact or preserved lesson, represents that truth. Under capture, he understood what most free people still fail to understand in daily life. You can lose the outer position and still keep the inner advantage. And once you keep that advantage, the game can turn. So the first lesson of Sun Tzu's strategy under pressure is this: win the battle for your own mind first. If pressure can make you frantic, it owns you. If fear can make you obvious, it owns you. If urgency can make you waste motion, it owns you. But if you can remain still enough to see clearly, then pressure stops being a prison. It becomes information. And information is power. Most people think they fail under pressure because they are weak. That is not always true. Many strong people fail under pressure. Many intelligent people fail under pressure. Many hard-working people fail under pressure. They fail because pressure changes how they process reality. When stress rises, perception narrows. You stop seeing the whole board. You become fixated on immediate threats. You become reactive instead of strategic. You stop asking, what is the best move? And start asking, how do I make this feeling stop? That shift is deadly, because the desire to escape discomfort quickly is what drives most bad decisions. A rushed apology, a desperate deal, an angry message, a poorly timed confrontation, a chaotic pivot, a reckless yes, an emotional no. Under pressure, people do not just reveal character, they reveal training. And most people have trained themselves badly. They have trained themselves to equate action with strength. But Sun Tzu teaches that timing matters more than activity. He teaches that shape matters more than force. He teaches that adaptation matters more than stubbornness. He teaches that the highest skill is not winning after chaos explodes. It is positioning so intelligently that chaos works in your favor. This is the opposite of modern ego. Modern ego says, "Show them how much I can do." Sun Tzu says, "Why show strength where concealment would give you more?" Modern ego says, "Push harder." Sun Tzu says, "Why collide with strength when weakness exists elsewhere?" Modern ego says, "Move now." Sun Tzu says, "Why move before the conditions serve you?" This is not passivity, it is disciplined restraint, and restraint under pressure is one of the rarest forms of power in the world, because anyone can act. Few can wait without becoming weak. Few can observe without becoming passive. Few can hold tension without spilling their position. But those who can do this gain access to something the frantic never will: choice. And under pressure, choice is everything. The pressured person feels trapped. The strategic person sees multiple paths. The pressured person tries to force one bad option. The strategic person changes the board. The pressured person thinks in terms of survival. The strategic person thinks in terms of leverage. That is the transition we need to make. From overwhelmed to observant. From observant to deliberate. From deliberate to dangerous. And to see what that looks like in action, we need another story. This one from a battlefield far larger and bloodier. A moment when apparent weakness became the setup for one of history's most devastating strategic reversals. In the early Han dynasty, the general Han Xin became famous for doing what average commanders could not do. He understood psychology, he understood terrain, he understood morale, and above all, he understood that what appears irrational can become powerful when it manipulates the mind correctly. One of the most famous stories associated with Han Xin is the Battle of Jingxing. He led forces against a stronger enemy. On paper, the position was dangerous. The enemy had advantages. Han Xin's troops were not in the superior situation. So what did he do? He placed parts of his army with their backs to a river. To an untrained eye, that seems reckless. Why would you place your own men in a position where retreat becomes nearly impossible? Because Han Xin understood something brutal about human behavior under pressure. When men believe they have comfortable options, they divide their commitment. When retreat feels available, fear uses it. But when escape closes, focus sharpens. The soldiers fought with far greater desperation because survival demanded total engagement. At the same time, Han Xin used deception and timing to disrupt the enemy's assumptions and seize their camp. The enemy, thinking in ordinary patterns, misread the entire situation. What looked like weakness was structured pressure. What looked like risk was engineered psychology. What looked like chaos was hidden design. And that is exactly how strategic minds operate. They understand that winning is not about brute force alone. It is about controlling perception. Han Xin was not merely fighting bodies. He was shaping minds. His own men's minds, the enemy's mind, the emotional atmosphere of the battlefield itself. And once you understand that, you begin to understand Sun Tzu at a much deeper level. Because Sun Tzu is not simply a book about combat. It is a book about pressure systems. How people behave when afraid. How groups behave when uncertain. How leaders behave when threatened. How opportunities appear when assumptions harden. Han Xin's example teaches us a second lesson. Lesson 2. Under pressure, shape the conditions instead of becoming their victim. This is where most people lose. They let conditions dictate their behavior. They let deadlines control their nervous system. They let competitors control their pacing. They let criticism control their confidence. They let bad circumstances define the emotional meaning of the moment. But strategy begins when you stop asking, "How do I survive these conditions?" and start asking, "How can I shape these conditions?" That shift is enormous. Maybe you are overwhelmed at work. Most people respond by trying to complete everything. The strategic response is different. You identify the one task that changes the pressure on everything else. Maybe your business is not growing. Most people respond by posting more, doing more, adding more products, copying more trends. The strategic response is to find the bottleneck. What single weakness is keeping everything else from moving? Maybe your life feels chaotic. Most people try to become more disciplined in an abstract way. The strategic response is to redesign the environment so bad choices become harder and good choices become easier. This is what intelligent pressure management looks like. Not becoming superhuman through effort, but becoming effective through design. Han Xin used terrain, emotion, and deception. You can use systems, timing, communication, and environment. Same principle, different battlefield. And once you understand this, you stop admiring people only for how hard they work. You start studying how they think. Because the most formidable people often look calm, not because their life is easy, but because they have learned how to structure pressure instead of drowning in it. Whenever pressure rises, most people immediately ask the wrong questions. How do I fix this fast? How do I stop feeling this? How do I prove myself? How do I regain control right now? But Sun Tzu would ask better questions. Questions that slow panic and restore strategic vision. Here are 5 questions you should ask anytime life starts closing in on you. 1. Where am I wasting force? Under pressure, wasted effort multiplies. You answer too many messages, fight too many battles, respond to too many people, maintain too many commitments, try to save too many weak positions. Look carefully. What are you doing simply because you are anxious, not because it is effective? That is usually the first place to cut. 2. What is the real objective? Pressure creates distractions disguised as urgency. You start fighting side battles. You start protecting pride instead of results. You start solving symptoms instead of causes. Ask yourself, what actually matters here? Not emotionally, strategically. If you win that one thing, what changes? 3. Where is the weakness? Sun Tzu teaches not to attack strength directly when weakness exists elsewhere. So, where is the opening? In a negotiation, it may be silence. In conflict, it may be patience. In business, it may be a neglected niche. In personal growth, it may be sleep, focus, or emotional control, not motivation. Find the soft point. That is where leverage lives. 4. What does the other side expect me to do? This is one of the most important questions in strategy, because expectation creates predictability, and predictability creates traps. If someone expects you to react emotionally, your calm becomes power. If competitors expect you to follow the same model, your differentiation becomes power. If chaos expects you to rush, your pause becomes power. The unexpected move is often not flashy. It is simply the move emotion prevented others from seeing. 5. What would preserve strength instead of draining it? The strategic mind is protective of energy. It does not spend itself proving things to the wrong people. It does not glorify exhaustion. It does not confuse depletion with virtue, because a depleted person cannot think well, and if you cannot think well, pressure will command you. So ask, what move keeps me effective tomorrow too? That is usually the wiser move. These 5 questions alone can save people from years of self-created damage, because they bring you back to the central Sun Tzu principle. Do not become the servant of the moment. Command the moment. Now, let us move from China to Rome, because one of the greatest examples of outsmart, don't outwork did not look heroic at all in the beginning. It looked like cowardice. It looked weak. It looked dishonorable. And that is exactly why it worked. When Hannibal invaded Italy during the Second Punic War, Rome was shaken. Hannibal was not just another enemy commander. He was one of history's most dangerous military minds. He crossed the Alps, inflicted devastating losses, and made Rome look vulnerable. Under this kind of pressure, there is a very predictable response: panic, pride, overreaction. Rome wanted decisive action. Rome wanted revenge. Rome wanted a leader who would meet force with force and wipe away humiliation quickly. Instead, Rome got Fabius Maximus, and Fabius refused to play the expected game. He avoided direct large-scale battle with Hannibal. He harassed supply lines. He shadowed movements. He delayed. He wore the enemy down. To many Romans, this was infuriating. It looked passive. It looked timid. It looked like the opposite of glory. But Fabius understood the situation better than the crowd did. He knew that giving Hannibal the kind of battle Hannibal wanted was not courage. It was stupidity dressed up as honor. So he chose something much harder than reckless aggression. He chose restraint under public pressure. Think about that. Not only was he facing an external enemy, he was also facing internal criticism. His own side wanted action. His own people doubted him. His own reputation was being damaged by the very patience that might save them. This is one of the purest strategic lessons in history. Because many people can remain calm when everyone supports their plan. Very few can remain disciplined when even their allies demand that they abandon it. That is where true composure is tested. And Fabius teaches us a third lesson. Lesson 3. The pressure to prove yourself quickly is often the trap. This matters far beyond war. In your career, you may feel pressure to prove your value immediately, so you overpromise, overcommit, overextend. In business, you may feel pressure to show growth, so you chase vanity metrics, force scaling too early, and build a fragile machine. In relationships, you may feel pressure to secure certainty, so you push for answers before trust has matured. In content creation, you may feel pressure because numbers are low, so you abandon the strategy too early, imitate trends that do not fit your audience, and destroy long-term positioning for short-term relief. This is why pressure is so dangerous. It makes bad timing feel necessary. It makes premature action feel brave. It makes strategic patience feel weak. Fabius reminds us that sometimes the smartest move is not to match the tempo the world is trying to force on you. Sometimes the smartest move is to refuse the tempo entirely, to move slower than fear wants, to think longer than urgency allows, to protect the position instead of performing strength. Because every battlefield has invisible costs, and direct collision with a stronger immediate force usually favors the fool, not the warrior. Sun Tzu would have understood Fabius perfectly. Do not fight the battle the enemy wants. Do not accept the rhythm pressure imposes. Do not rush into proving your courage. Position, observe, drain, strike where it serves you. That is strategy. and it is deeply uncomfortable for ego, which is why most people never master it. Let's bring this out of history and into your life. Because some people hear stories like these and think they only belong to generals, kings, and old battlefields. But pressure is pressure. Whether it happens in a war camp or on your phone at midnight, whether it happens in a Roman Senate or inside your own thoughts, the forms change, the principles do not. In work, you are drowning in tasks. Everyone around you is glorifying busyness. You feel guilty unless you are visibly overloaded. But the Sun Tzu response is not to sprint blindly, it is to identify leverage. What is the 20% of work that neutralizes 80% of pressure? What can be delegated, delayed, deleted, or systemized? What battle are you fighting because it matters? And what battle are you fighting because panic hates stillness? In business, your growth is slow. Competitors seem louder. You start thinking you need to do everything. More offers, more platforms, more edits, more features, more content, more noise. But often the growth problem is not a volume problem. It is a clarity problem. Your offer may be unclear. Your positioning may be generic. Your hook may be weak. Your audience targeting may be broad. So instead of grinding harder, you sharpen. That is Sun Tzu, a clean strike where confusion once lived. In relationships, you feel tension, distance, uncertainty, mixed signals, pressure rises. The untrained mind wants immediate resolution. Let me force clarity. Let me explain everything. Let me react so they understand my value. But strategy asks a better question. What serves the position? Sometimes silence reveals more than pursuit. Sometimes boundaries reveal more than pleading. Sometimes observation reveals whether the relationship is worth fighting for at all. Again, this is not emotional coldness. It is refusing to let anxiety choose your moves. In your inner life, this may be the most important battlefield of all. Many people are not destroyed by external pressure. They are destroyed by the story pressure activates inside them. I'm behind. I'm failing. I'm losing my chance. Everyone is ahead of me. I need to do something now. Those thoughts create internal war, and from that war, people make self-destructive choices. Sun Tzu's wisdom here is timeless. Do not attack from disorder. Do not move from confusion. Do not commit from panic. Stabilize perception first, then act. And this may sound less dramatic than motivational culture, but it is far more useful. Because motivation without strategy burns bright and dies fast. Strategy, on the other hand, survives contact with reality. Musashi is often remembered as a swordsman, but that summary is too shallow. He was a student of rhythm, perception, timing, and psychological dominance. He understood something that Sun Tzu understood too. Victory often belongs to the one who disrupts the enemy's mental state before the decisive clash even begins. One of the most famous stories about Musashi involves his duel with Sasaki Kojiro. The details have become legendary over time, but the broad outline is well known. Musashi arrived late. That was not a random act. It was part of controlling the emotional environment. Kojiro was made to wait. Waiting under tension changes people. It irritates them, destabilizes them, pulls them out of clarity. By the time the duel began, Musashi had already influenced the battlefield without swinging a blade. Then he used an improvised wooden weapon, shaped from an oar according to tradition, and exploited timing and reach. Again, the point is not just the duel. The point is the mind behind it. Musashi did not rely on honor theatre. He did not rely on predictable rituals. He did not step into the fight under the enemy's preferred emotional conditions. He shaped them. This is what strategic people do under pressure. They understand that the battle begins long before contact, in conversation, in timing, in expectation, in pacing, in emotional composure. And that teaches a fourth lesson. Lesson 4. Control the emotional rhythm and you control the fight. Under pressure, most people lose rhythm. They speed up when they should slow down. They explain when they should listen. They interrupt when they should let silence build. They answer instantly when patience would create advantage. They reveal need when restraint would create strength. Musashi's lesson is not about copying theatrical behavior. It is about understanding the power of rhythm. Every difficult situation has a rhythm. A negotiation has a rhythm. An argument has a rhythm. A market has a rhythm. A creative career has a rhythm. Your own mind has a rhythm. If you let pressure rush you into the wrong tempo, you start making moves that belong to fear instead of strategy. But if you can set or interrupt rhythm, you begin to reclaim command. This is why pauses matter. Silence matters. Timing matters. Preparation matters. The space between reaction and action matters. That small space is where disciplined people separate themselves from impulsive people. And over time, that difference compounds into entirely different lives. Let's be honest. Outwork everybody sounds heroic. It sounds noble. It sounds like the quote you put on a wall. But outsmart, don't outwork sounds almost suspiciously soft to some people, like a shortcut, like an excuse, like avoidance, but only to people who do not understand the cost of wasted force. Sun Tzu did not despise effort. He despised unnecessary effort. He did not reject discipline. He rejected foolish collision. He did not glorify comfort. He glorified advantage. And those are very different things. The person who outsmarts does not necessarily work less in total. They simply refuse to work stupidly. They refuse to pour life into unwinnable angles. They refuse to burn energy where positioning could solve the problem more effectively. They refuse to let ego decide where strength should go. That is not weakness. That is maturity. Think of the strongest people you know, not the loudest, not the most performative, the strongest. Usually they do not react fast. Usually they do not chase every conflict. Usually they do not explain themselves endlessly. Usually they know where to place energy and where to withdraw it. That is strategic living. And under pressure, strategic living becomes survival. Because the world is full of hard workers who are exhausted, underleveraged, and increasingly bitter. Not because they lack character, but because they were never taught where effort should be placed. So they attack life head-on. Every problem gets the same answer: more force. And eventually, force without thought becomes self-harm. Sun Tzu offers another path. See first, position second, strike third. That order matters. If you reverse it, pressure will punish you. Now let's make this extremely practical. If you are under pressure right now, financial pressure, emotional pressure, career pressure, social pressure, internal pressure, here is a framework built from Sun Tzu's principles. Step 1. Stop the emotional leak. Before you solve the problem, stop making it bigger through your emotional reaction. Do not send the panicked message. Do not make the desperate purchase. Do not agree to the weak deal. Do not post the rushed decision. Do not fight for the sake of releasing tension. Your first job is containment. If your energy is leaking everywhere, no strategy will hold. Step 2. Clarify the battlefield. What is actually happening? Not your interpretation, not your insecurity, not your worst-case fantasy. Facts. What is the problem? What are the constraints? What matters most? Who is involved? What are the incentives? What is the timeline? Clarity reduces emotional distortion. Step 3. Identify the center of gravity. Every pressure situation has a core variable. Find it. In business, it may be lead flow. In health, it may be sleep. In your schedule, it may be distraction. In a relationship, it may be trust erosion. In your mind, it may be self-created chaos from too much input. Do not attack 10 things when one thing is driving the other 9. Step 4. Refuse direct collision with strength. What are you trying to force that should be bypassed instead? Are you trying to outvolume people with bigger resources? Out-argue someone committed to misunderstanding you? Outrun a system problem with personal willpower? Outwork a clarity problem? Direct collision feels masculine to the ego, but often it is just inefficient suffering. Step 5. Create asymmetry. This is where strategy becomes powerful. How can you change the conditions so the same pressure affects you less and helps you more? Can you narrow your focus? Can you change the environment? Can you shift the timing? Can you use silence? Can you simplify the offer? Can you remove temptations? Can you pre-commit? Can you build systems that protect you when emotions are weak? Asymmetry is how smaller forces beat larger ones. Step 6. Preserve energy for decisive moments. Do not spend your best strength on minor battles. This is huge. Many people lose major wars because they exhausted themselves in daily skirmishes, pointless arguments, unnecessary errands, digital noise, ego contests, proving, explaining, reacting. Protect your edge. Step 7. Move with conviction once the opening is real. Strategy is not endless hesitation. Once the opening appears, move cleanly, decisively, without apology, without emotional clutter. The point of patience is not to avoid action forever. The point is to act when action has teeth. This framework is simple, but if you lived it seriously, your life would become far calmer and far more effective, because you would stop allowing pressure to turn you into prey. Let us ground this in a more modern human lesson. There are many survival stories from war, imprisonment, and captivity, where the winners were not the physically strongest people in the room. They were often the people who preserved mental structure under extreme stress. Consider the many recorded accounts from prisoners of war and political detainees across the 20th century. Different countries, different conflicts, different circumstances, but similar patterns appear again and again. The survivors who maintained the greatest resilience often did a few critical things. They controlled attention. They created inner routines. They resisted panic spirals. They protected identity. They observed captors. They conserved emotional energy. They avoided unnecessary confrontation while waiting for meaningful opportunities. This is not cinematic fantasy. It is documented across memoirs and historical testimonies. Under unbearable pressure, the mind became the decisive terrain, not because intelligence magically removed suffering, but because structure prevented collapse. This is profoundly relevant today. Most people are not in literal captivity, but many are psychologically captured by algorithms, captured by comparison, captured by debt, captured by other people's approval, captured by urgency, captured by shame, captured by overstimulation. And because the prison is normalized, they do not even recognize it. They think the answer is more effort inside the same broken system. But the strategic question is different. How do I stop thinking like a captive? How do I preserve mental command? How do I stop feeding the structure that weakens me? Sun Tzu would tell you that freedom begins with perception. See the trap, then stop moving like prey inside it. That may mean reducing noise, breaking dependency, simplifying routines, withdrawing from energy-draining environments, protecting sleep, building skills slowly, refusing false urgency, thinking independently again. This is how modern people outsmart pressure, not by becoming louder, by becoming less manipulable. And that is one of the deepest forms of power in the modern world. Now we need to talk about the most dangerous enemy of all. Not competitors, not critics, not circumstances. Impulse. Because under pressure, your own impulse can do more damage than any outside force. Sun Tzu repeatedly emphasizes knowledge of self, of enemy, of conditions. And self-knowledge is impossible if you romanticize your impulses. You are not dangerous because you feel strongly. You are dangerous when you can feel strongly and still choose correctly. That distinction defines grown men from overgrown boys. Pressure will tempt you toward all kinds of false power. Anger that feels like strength. Busyness that feels like progress. Control that feels like leadership. Possessiveness that feels like love. Consumption that feels like reward. Retaliation that feels like justice. But many of these are just emotional reflexes wearing armor. And if you do not expose them, they will run your life. This is why Sun Tzu's wisdom is as much spiritual as strategic. Because to outsmart pressure, you must first stop worshipping every signal your body sends. You must stop treating adrenaline like truth. You must stop treating urgency like reality. You must stop treating emotional intensity like moral authority. Instead, you become a student of yourself. What pressure makes you do? What fear makes you exaggerate? What shame makes you hide? What ego makes you force? What loneliness makes you chase? What insecurity makes you overwork? This is not weakness. This is reconnaissance. And reconnaissance saves lives. If you know that pressure makes you impulsive, then you build pauses. If you know that rejection makes you obsessive, then you build boundaries. If you know that uncertainty makes you overwork, then you build decision rules. If you know that criticism makes you abandon your path, then you build standards stronger than applause. This is how a man stops being ruled by the inner enemy. He studies it. Then he designs against it. That is Sun Tzu in the soul. Let's bring all of this to the center. What does strength actually look like under pressure? Not theatrics, not noise, not visible struggle for its own sake. Real strength under pressure looks like this: to be insulted and not lose your strategy, to be rushed and not lose your timing, to be afraid and not lose your judgment, to be doubted and not abandon your position, to be tired and still protect what matters, to be tempted and still refuse the bad trade, to be surrounded by urgency and still choose precision. That is strength. Strength is not proving you can carry everything. Strength is knowing what not to carry. Strength is not reacting first. Strength is seeing first. Strength is not working harder in every direction. Strength is applying force where it changes outcomes. This is what Sun Tzu knew, and this is why his ideas still outlive empires. Because the battlefield keeps changing, but human weakness does not. People still rush under pressure, still chase validation, still overextend, still telegraph fear, still collide with strength out of ego, still mistake exhaustion for worthiness. And because of that, ancient strategy remains modern medicine. If you can learn to see pressure as a revealer of patterns instead of a command to panic, you begin to transform. You stop asking, "How do I survive this moment?" and start asking, "What is this moment teaching me about leverage, timing, and self-command?" That is the shift. That is the warrior's shift, not toward aggression, toward mastery. So when life tightens around you, remember these rules. Do not let urgency steal your intelligence. Do not fight the battle the enemy wants. Do not confuse motion with progress. Do not spend major energy on minor conflicts. Do not attack strength when weakness is available. Do not let pressure dictate your tempo. Do not worship impulse. Do not prove yourself through waste. Preserve energy. Study conditions. Control rhythm. Wait for openings. Strike with precision. And above all, when pressure rises, the person who remains clear becomes rare, and the rare person becomes powerful. Because while everyone else is reacting, he is reading the board. While everyone else is proving, he is positioning. While everyone else is exhausting themselves, he is choosing decisive ground. That is how you outsmart. Not by avoiding work, but by making your work count. Not by escaping pressure, but by learning how to think inside it. Not by becoming emotionless, but by becoming unruled. That is Sun Tzu's strategy. And in a world addicted to noise, it may be one of the last true advantages left. If this message hit you, then do not leave it as inspiration. Use it. Take one pressure point in your life right now and ask, where am I wasting force? Where is the real opening? What battle am I fighting that I should be outmaneuvering instead? And if you want more videos like this, where we break down Sun Tzu, Musashi, Stoicism, and real strategic lessons for modern life, subscribe now, and do not stop here. Watch the next video on screen, because this lesson becomes even more powerful when you understand how to stay calm while everyone else loses control. That is where the real advantage begins.